Greetings, friends. It is Corey from SuperKamiGuru9000, and we are at Dragon Con 2014, the epicenter of all things sci-fi, pop culture, and comic book related. And we are here with the main man himself, the Media Relations Director, Dan Carroll. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well today, but I want to point out that I'm not the main man. I just get to talk about everybody else. We've got 2,300 volunteers putting this together, and we have 62,000 people expected at Dragon Con this weekend. So I'm just a guy who gets to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. What is your job as Media Relations Director?
Oh, well, my job is to do three things. One is I coordinate all the interviews between reporters and those people who are guests at Dragon Con. That's the first thing. The other thing I do is I invite reporters to Dragon Con, and then I check to make sure reporters who apply to come to Dragon Con are valid media sources, and then I make sure they have passes and all the information they need in order to come to Dragon Con. Lastly, I get to talk to folks like you about how awesome Dragon Con is.
Here at Dragon Con, obviously you get to work with a lot of famous people, you get to meet some celebrities. Are there any that you get really starstruck with, or one that you really get forward to meeting?
Well, considering last year I met Lucy Lawless, and I just shook hands with Tricia Helfer. No, I normally can compose myself pretty well, except a few years ago I met one of the cast members of Mystery Science Theater 3000. That freaked me out. Meeting Bill Corbett, who's also from Riff Tracks, a Dragon Con guest in 2011. It was amazing. But otherwise, after a while, you realize that you are there to take care of the fans, and the guests are here to interact with the fans, and that's really the focus.
So Dragon Con started out kind of small, but obviously over the years, it's become one of the premier events of Atlanta. How has it grown over the years?
Well, I just want to point out, earlier I said we have 2,300 volunteers. We started out with 1,700 attendees at the first Dragon Con. That's 1,700 attendees. Now we have more people than that running Dragon Con and putting it on. Our growth rate has been exponential. We try to keep it under control by managing the ticket price, to be honest, or the membership price. And we make sure that we are providing the best event for the city of Atlanta. But when I started with Dragon Con, we had 3 hotels. Now we have 5. We had a giant room full of vending that was 5 football fields of vending. We now have 9 football fields of vending. And that's our measurement of vending at Dragon Con. And that is in the America's Mart. But the 5 hotels, the expansion continues. We make room, we accommodate. A few years back, you may be aware that we went ahead and had to put a rule that you couldn't come into Dragon Con unless you were actually a Dragon Con member. People got upset because they thought we were being mean or greedy, and the truth is we were doing it because we had run out of space for people who were not members, and we wanted to make sure the members had the space they needed. So also we continue to look for ways to expand our programming. In the past few years, we've added a kaleidoscope track, which is Disney Young Adults, and also puppetry, which handles both children's puppetry, and we have our very popular Puppet Slams, which are more adult puppetry in the evening.
Yeah, I heard about that earlier. That's actually like a saucy puppet show?
I would say saucy would be a word for it. It's been described by Bo Brown, our track director, as a Puppet Slam is an event where the people who do Winnie the Pooh all day long get a chance to cut loose. We are also the sponsors this year of the National Puppet Slam. Not only do we have Puppet Slams here on a regular basis at Dragon Con through the weekend, we also are sponsoring the National Puppet Slam. Bo's going to be mad because I got it wrong. And that's going to be held at the Center for Puppetry Arts right down the road.
That's actually one of my favorite things about Dragon Con is the fact that when it first started out, a lot of people think sci-fi convention. It's just a bunch of people dressed as stormtroopers. It's just a bunch of comic books. But every year, you guys manage to add something completely new to it and expand upon it. And obviously, I think that you yourself are a fan. What subculture would you say that you fall into in terms of like geek or comic books? Like, what's your favorite thing?
Well, there's no doubt, and I have a feeling I might be asked about this later, but there's no doubt I grew up as a Marvel Comics fan, grew up as a classic horror fan, and by classic horror I mean Universal Monsters, there's folks that you see, what would you call that, like the Ray Harryhausen movies, John Agar movies, Brain from Planet Arrows and stuff like that. I love that stuff. The creature feature, and I still love that. It's something I follow to this day. I love that we have a room that shows those type of classic horror movies here, along with a room that shows anime. So we do have diversity. But for me, I'd say Marvel Comics in the old days, DC Comics more recently. I love the DC animated universe. My office is right across the hall from the animation track, and I love that. I love the folks over there. Go visit a lot. But I also love the Marvel movies.
No, I really like that. I like the fact that you mentioned a lot of classic horror movies, and I'm going to go on a little bit of a diatribe here because I grew up on those too. My father always had me watching the old, like, classic Universal monsters and the chillers from the 40s and the 50s, and I wish I did see a little more representation here, but I have been seeing a lot of classic Universal monsters as well, like Bride of Frankenstein, and even some of the newer stuff from the 60s, like Godzilla. And again, that's what makes Dragon Con so incredible. And you did sort of answer one of my own questions, so I'm going to go ahead and give you another one.
Go ahead.
Star Wars or Star Trek?
Well, I will tell you this is an important question for me. Recently, I changed jobs, and I was hired based on the answer to this question. And as much as I love Garrett and I love the Star Trek track here at Dragon Con, it's got to be Star Wars. I was 14 years old when I saw Star Wars in Manhattan, in Times Square. And I was in a theater that was surrounded by subway trains. So during the battle scenes, the subway trains were rocking the theater. So it was a lot of fun, and we were very lucky a few years back to have Carrie Fisher come join us here at Dragon Con. And there's just something about Star Wars that clicks with me. And don't get me wrong, I love that Patrick Stewart is here this year. I love Next Generation and watched it. I've seen every episode, seen almost every episode of Voyager, and the original classic series. I'm old enough to remember it being on prime time.
I mean, I am a Star Wars fan, and I do love Patrick Stewart. I'm more of a, Professor X-Men kind of fan of his work, but it is great to see him here because we saw him here a few years ago, and unfortunately we just missed him. And just to see how he's garnering such great crowds this year just shows he's as popular and as relevant as ever. Now, another thing that's really great about Dragon Con is not only do you bring the fans together so that we can all celebrate the things that we love, but you guys do a number of charities. Could you tell us about some of those and how people could get involved?
Well, this year we're celebrating two separate charities. Well, we have one official charity, the Atlanta Community Food Bank. It's something we believe in at Dragon Con, and we've been supporting for many years behind the scenes, and this year we have put it forefront. It is our prime charity. And then we have the blood drive. The blood drive is fascinating because we every year we try to hit the record for the largest blood drive not in a crisis situation, and I think this year we're going to make it. I just walked past the blood drive, the lines waiting for donate blood, phenomenal. And then we do one other thing this year that we've just introduced, and that's Dragon Con Superheroes. And the Dragon Con Superheroes program allows Dragon Con volunteers and Dragon Con fans to go out in the community. We can go ahead and give back and care.
That's amazing. Not only do you give everybody a chance to come here and have a really great time, but you give them an opportunity to help out their city and do something really good for the community, and I think that's really amazing. But I think my favorite thing about Dragon Con is that it's sort of like an adult spring break, but it also has like some family events. Would you say it leans more towards one or the other, or what would you say?
No, I think we've done an amazing job creating a dual convention. During the daylight, we have plenty of events for children. We have Star Wars, lightsaber battles for kids. We have tauntaun races.
That sounds fun to me.
It sounds a lot of fun. But we also have crafts and creators. We have those amazing steampunk things on display. And by things, I mean it could be anything. So I don't want to name what it is, but folks have made amazing things and are on exhibition in our museum of steampunk. And also we have two tracks, the young adult track, the young adult literature track carries the Harry Potter and everything that falls along those lines, and any other young adult literature. And we also have the Kaleidoscope track, which I mentioned earlier, but let me explain what it is. The Kaleidoscope celebrates those shows that are on Disney or Nickelodeon that are live action shows that might not get the representation you expect to see at a convention. The iCarly, the Sunny with a Chance, the Wizards of Waverly Place, and I wish my daughter was here to hear me talk about these shows.
All right, well, Dan, thank you so much for being in this interview. Thank you for having us here this weekend. It has been just so much fun. Is there anything else you want to say to the fans of Dragon Con?
Well, thank you very much for talking about Dragon Con. www.dragoncon.org will have more information for you, and we look forward to seeing you. This year we expect 62,000 people here in Atlanta. Come on down and be part of the fun next year.
All right, we ourselves are actually YouTubers. We review anime, and we do a lot of videos. And we heard that you yourself have your own website, which is Seriously Dan. Could you tell us a little bit about that and how people can see that?
Sure. SeriouslyDan.com was started originally as a advice column for geeks. I spent a lot of time doing mentoring of younger folks, explaining concepts like the law of minimums and planning. I'm a professional planner. And I started giving practical life advice, and I'm known at Dragon Con in most places as the guy who hugs folks. So it's, our branding is love, encouragement, and practical advice, and that's three things that many people in the geek community can have. But our original plan, like I said, was that we would do all of this and kind of an advice column, and quickly turned into my cool friends do really cool stuff. And I've interviewed folks who have been on TV for prop making. I've interviewed folks who, writers. I've interviewed writers. I've interviewed actors. I've interviewed people running charities. Last year I did 11 conventions in 13 weeks, live remotes. And we encourage you, come to Seriously Dan. We're going to be relaunching the website with stories of my childhood geekdom. They're going to be individual stories, and they're going to be written, but we're also going to be returning to the weekly podcast, including some podcasts that we record here at Dragon Con. You'll find a little bit about the community, you'll find a little bit about my history, and then maybe a little bit about yourself, SeriouslyDan.com.
All right, Dan, thank you again so much. And
Thank
you again for having us. Check it out this weekend in Atlanta, Labor Day weekend, Dragon Con 2014.